Peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. I hope you are well. First request, I apologize for. In the last lecture, I was just a bit tired, as I mentioned to you, so I didn't have the time and all that. And because of preparing for the exams, I will try, God willing, to explain the remaining topics. I will talk, God willing, in greater detail about blood oxygen level dependent contrast, which is bold. I have started to delve more deeply into functional MRI, and functional MRI, or MRI functional, is what you want to see function in the brain. You want to see activity, or in social activity happening. For example, you want to see that there are patients undergoing surgery in the brain. You want to make absolutely sure that the part that will be removed during the surgery will not affect a specific area or function in the brain, such as the part responsible for speech, for example, or the part responsible for vision, or whatever. As we know, inside the brain, there are neurons, and each part is responsible for a specific function. I really want to be absolutely reassured that when I undergo my surgery, it won't negatively affect or have any adverse impact on the area in the brain responsible for speech or vision. They have developed a technique called blood oxygen level dependent contrast, BOLD, which is crucial. The idea behind BOLD is that when you move your hands or fingers, for example, and you do some timing with your hand by bringing your fingers together, you are stimulating a specific location in the brain. Similarly, when you speak, you are stimulating a certain area in the brain. Your movement, speech, or any action you take stimulates the location in the brain, which is very important. This stimulation is necessary because I want to talk or perform an action, and there must be an external stimulus that causes the brain to start working or send nerve signals to the organ or function you want to activate. Okay, so now if I assume that I have, for example, in the patient's brain, there is a specific location that is responsible for a certain function. When there is a certain stimulus, like wanting to speak or move, you want to move your hand, this location is activated. This place starts to create or request for something to increase it in order to take this in a natural way in concentration. Be certain of the concentration. The stable concentration or neutral concentration of oxygen or oxyhemoglobin means hemoglobin that contains oxygen, and deoxyhemoglobin is hemoglobin that has had the oxygen removed. If this location or these neurons want to work, they need oxygen, glucose, and blood supply. Therefore, oxygen is very important in their vital processes. The area that is active or working will start to have a higher concentration. If there is a place where the concentrations of oxyhemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin are close or equal, then that area lacks my activity. So what do? I perform an imaging sequence based on the difference in concentration between oxyhemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin. This concentration varies. In cases where a specific function occurs in the location I want to image. If a function occurs, then the order will be taken and the blood supply will increase, leading to a higher concentration of oxyhemoglobin compared to deoxyhemoglobin. Oxyhemoglobin is referred to as having a property called diamagnetic, meaning it has diamagnetic magnetic properties. On the other hand, deoxyhemoglobin has a magnetic property called paramagnetic. When we talk about paramagnetic like gadolinium, it means it has unpaired electrons. We mentioned before that when we were talking about gadolinium, mentioning that in its energy levels, There are certain states present in the energy levels. Each state carries the magnetic field of the electron or in another magnetic field. I call them electron pairs because each one points in a direction and the two repel each other. This magnetic property is weak, similar to that. Now, regarding deoxyhemoglobin, it is said to be paramagnetic. What does paramagnetic mean? It means that you have free electrons here, unlike the electrons in oxyhemoglobin, which are bound to oxygen, so it seems like it has saturation, as if there are no free electrons available. Meanwhile, deoxyhemoglobin has 4 unpaired electrons. These 4 unpaired electrons do what for me? They create a certain effect, and of course, these electrons also do what for me? Leave. They changed and manipulated the magnetic field, which is the idea of having a lack of harmony in the existing magnetic field. The homogeneity in the magnetic field will result from the presence of electrons, each of which has its own magnetic field, due to the presence of deoxyhemoglobin. The presence of deoxyhemoglobin leads to the existence of unburnt electrons, resulting in magnetic sensitivity and causing rapid dephasing of the protons. So, what happens at that moment? You experience signal loss, meaning a quick loss in your signal, especially when talking about the T2 star sequence. T2 star sequences are significantly affected by magnetic susceptibility. If the concentration of deoxyhemoglobin is high, it causes signal loss. On the other hand, if oxyhemoglobin is the one with a high concentration, it is diamagnetic, not paramagnetic, which means in this case, the signal will be weak. Conversely, it will give you a higher signal intensity compared to what? Compared to the normal signal, meaning when both oxygen and deoxy are at similar concentrations. If the concentrations of oxygen, oxyhemoglobin, and deoxyhemoglobin are the same, then my signal will be stable. Let's assume I measure my time here. Over time, before any influence occurs, both are equal. Now, in the presence of an influence, something called depression must happen. What does depression mean? It means that the level of oxyhemoglobin decreases as its production for the cells increases, leading to a reduction in the concentration of oxyhemoglobin. After that, it quickly increases again until it reaches a certain peak, and then it starts to decrease as my stimulation begins to fade, eventually returning to the baseline. The baseline is the area where oxyhemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin are equal. Again, I will create a curve that shows the relationship between certain concentrations at the beginning, in a completely normal state. I am currently talking about their concentration within the tissue before the presence of a stimulus, before both start to work together. It started to have a good stream. Now the cells have begun to consume oxyhemoglobin more than deoxyhemoglobin, so the concentration of oxyhemoglobin will decrease compared to deoxyhemoglobin. This will lead to a depression. After that, the oxyhemoglobin that started to come in has increased. The supply has begun to rise, so the concentration will increase. It will reach the peak stimulus, which will then end, and the concentration will return to what it was. This creates a signal intensity. The presence of oxyhemoglobin in higher amounts than deoxyhemoglobin gives you a higher signal above the baseline compared to when both were equal. Therefore, the presence of oxyhemoglobin at a high level indicates that a specific function is occurring in the brain or that there is a certain stimulus, and this is the location where it happens. It means that you perform this function. So I started to do something called functional imaging. You take a picture, for example, of the area before the stimulus, and then take a picture during the stimulus. This means you are doing something called on and off, which means you take a picture you have the stimulus and then an image while you have the stimulus, and then an image when you remove the stimulus. So when you have the stimulus, your signal should be high, and then it returns to baseline when you remove it. Then your signal comes back again. Why? Because you take several images. The reason is that in reality, the difference in the signal is due to the high presence of oxyhemoglobin compared to the equal concentration between oxyhemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin. This difference is not large. For example, it's about a 2-3% increase. So this is how it works. In summary, this difference is quite significant and crucial for accurately measuring voxel by voxel. They do this several times meticulously and then take these images together to start observing the subtle changes that will occur over time. They can then confidently tell you this is the active location. For example, we have previously talked about the general idea. Now, let's closely examine this image. It clearly shows one specific case, and this is another distinct case where you can't easily clarify the difference between them. However, it gradually starts to give you a comprehensive view that represents the specific location in the brain responsible for the flashlight stimulus, for instance. So, you can take multiple images and then start calculating from them a specific image that you want, or create a certain one. The same idea applies here. For example, the locations that are already known, for example, tell you that these places had a concentration of oxyhemoglobin compared to deoxyhemoglobin. This, of course, is part of the story. In blood techniques which rely on the ratio between oxyhemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin, cerebral activation is referred to as the increase in blood flow, which enhances metabolic activity and thus requires hemodynamic coupling, leading to an increase in the concentration of oxyhemoglobin over deoxyhemoglobin. Deoxyhemoglobin is considered to affect the tissue and influence the tissue. Star. As we mentioned, this is the shape of the signal or the possible shape of the signal that can appear. Of course, the shape of the signal varies in this way and has a high noise level. If you are measuring the signal over time, whether you are making a change, you will find that the signal appears in this way based on the stress and rest or the now and the AF. For me, the stimulus for you is the bold technique, folks. That's it. Or the bold sequence. That's it. God willing, I will do the profiling and send it to you. God willing. Thank you very much, and peace be upon you, and God's mercy and blessings.